My name is Arya Bennett. I am 31 years old, and last Christmas I did something my family still refuses to talk about out loud. At 7:08 p.m., my father called to confirm that dinner would be ready by 8. At 7:11, my brother texted me a list of dietary restrictions for his friends. At 7:14, I turned off my phone, walked out of my apartment, and got into a car that took me straight to the airport. By the time 32 people showed up at my parents' house expecting a full Christmas dinner, the kitchen was dark, the oven was cold, and I was already somewhere over the Atlantic. What happened in that house that night, and what was said about me in front of all of them, ended my role in that family permanently. And the worst part? I knew exactly what I was doing. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, just far enough from my parents to pretend I had a life of my own, and just close enough that their expectations could still reach me without effort. 40 minutes. That was the distance between independence and obligation. I worked as a financial consultant for a private firm, the kind of job where people trusted you with numbers they didn't fully understand and decisions they didn't want to take responsibility for. And over the last 4 years, I had quietly built something far more valuable than my salary: private clients, independent contracts, investments that no one in my family knew existed. To them, I had a stable job. That's all they needed to know. Because if they had known the truth, how much I actually made, how much control I had, how much I had already done for them, they wouldn't have seen it as success. They would have seen it as access. My father, Richard Bennett, was a man who believed authority was something you never questioned, only obeyed. He spent 30 years managing operations at a logistics company and brought that same management style home with him: clear instructions, no discussions, and an unspoken rule that everyone had a role. His role was to decide. My mother's role was to maintain. And mine was to handle everything that required effort. My younger brother, Caleb, was 28 years old and had never once been expected to contribute in any meaningful way. He still lived at home, still spent his money faster than he earned it, still showed up to family dinners like a guest. But Caleb was the son, and in our family, that meant he was never the one being asked. I was 13 the first time I cooked a full holiday meal. Not helped, not assisted. Cooked. My grandmother stood beside me at the counter, guiding me through each step, showing me how to time everything so it came out together, how to season without measuring, how to move quickly without making it look rushed. I remember feeling proud, useful, seen, until my father walked into the kitchen, looked at what I was doing, and said, "Good, now we don't have to worry about holidays anymore." That was the moment it stopped being something I was learning and became something I was expected to do. Every year after that, nothing changed. Same kitchen, same pressure, same silent agreement that this was my responsibility now. No one ever asked Caleb to help. No one ever even suggested it. 3 years ago, my father called me late at night. His tone was different, tighter, controlled in a way that meant something had already gone wrong. He told me there had been a delay with the property taxes, that the amount had accumulated, that it needed to be handled quickly. The number was just under $18,000. He didn't ask me to pay it. He just told me. And I paid it the next morning. No discussion, no conditions, no acknowledgement beyond a brief "we'll figure it out later" that never actually turned into anything. 6 months after that, the furnace broke. I covered it. The following year, part of the roof needed repairs. I paid for that too. Each time, it became easier for them to accept. Each time, it became harder for me to ignore what was really happening. Because I wasn't helping anymore. I was sustaining them, and they had already started to expect it. Thanksgiving that year should have been the moment I walked away. I started cooking at 6 a.m. By noon, the kitchen was filled with the smell of roasted turkey, butter, garlic, and something burning slightly because I was managing too many things at once and no one was there to take over even one of them. 14 people showed up. They ate. They laughed. They complimented the food, and not a single one of them asked who had spent 8 hours making it. Caleb arrived late. He filled his plate before everyone else had even sat down. Ate standing up. Left his dishes in the sink, and took the last slice of pie downstairs without asking if anyone else wanted it. When my father stood up to make a toast, he raised his glass and said, "This is what family is about. Opening our home to everyone. Our home, not my work, not my time, not my exhaustion. Just his house. His generosity. His moment. I stood at the sink for almost 2 hours after that, washing dishes while my mother dried them beside me in silence, and at one point I said, "Caleb could help." She didn't even look at me. "You know how he is," she whispered. Yes, I did. That was the problem. December 22nd. I was sitting at the dining table wrapping gifts with my mother when my father walked in with Caleb right behind him, both of them smiling in that way that meant they had already decided something I was about to be responsible for. My father leaned against the doorway and said it like it was nothing. "Your brother's friends are all coming for Christmas." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. "How many?" I asked. Caleb shrugged. 20, maybe more. Maybe more. Like it didn't matter. Like it was just a number. Like it wasn't hours of work. My father smiled. "You've always handled it well." And there it was, not a request. Not a question. A conclusion. Already made. Already final. They expected me to cook for all of them. Again. Like I always had, I smiled back. That was the part they didn't understand. I didn't argue. I didn't say no. I didn't push back. I just smiled, and that was the moment I decided I was done. I didn't decide it out of anger. That would have been easier to understand, easier to justify later, easier to explain if anyone had ever truly asked. I decided it calmly, quietly, with the kind of clarity that only comes after years of repetition, when the same pattern stops feeling temporary and starts revealing itself as permanent. Because this wasn't about Christmas. It was never about one dinner, one argument, one moment of disrespect that could be forgiven and forgotten like all the others. It was about accumulation. Years of being the solution to problems I didn't create. Years of stepping in before anyone even had to ask. Years of making things work so smoothly that no one ever noticed how much effort it actually took. And the worst part wasn't that they relied on me. It was that they had stopped seeing me as someone who could choose not to. December 23rd started like every other preparation day had started for the last decade. A list. A long, detailed, exhausting list that lived in my head before it ever touched paper. Groceries, prep work, timing, storage. Backup plans for things that could go wrong. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. out of habit, even though I didn't need to. Even though, for the first time in years, I had no intention of following through. Still, my body moved like it always did. Coffee, notebook, pen. I sat at the kitchen counter in my apartment and began writing everything down as if I were actually going to do it. Every dish, every ingredient, every step, mapped out with the precision of someone who had done this too many times to make mistakes. Roasted turkey. Glazed ham. 3 types of stuffing. Mashed potatoes. Sweet potatoes. Green beans. Cranberry sauce. Dinner rolls. 2 pies. 1 backup dessert. 32 people. I wrote it all down. Every last detail. And then I stared at it for a long time. Not with stress, not with dread, but with something much quieter. Detachment. Because for the first time, that list didn't feel like a responsibility. It felt like evidence, proof of something I had allowed to continue for far too long. At 9:12 a.m., my phone rang. My father. I let it ring twice before answering. "Did you start shopping?" he asked. No greeting, no hesitation. No acknowledgement that this was my time he was stepping into without permission. "Not yet," I said. A pause. Just long enough for him to register something slightly off. "Well, don't wait too long. Stores will get crowded." Of course. Logistics. Efficiency. Execution. That was the language he understood. "I know," I said. Another pause. Then, "Make sure you get enough this time. Last year was cutting it close." Last year, when I cooked for 21 people instead of the planned 15, because Caleb had invited a few extra friends without telling anyone until they were already at the door. Cutting it close. That's what he remembered. Not that everything had still been done. Not that no one had gone without. Just that it hadn't been as seamless as he expected. "I'll handle it," I said. because that was always the answer. And he accepted it immediately. Good, he replied, and hung up. At 11:40 a.m., Caleb texted me, "Hey, quick thing, 2 more people confirmed. Also, one of them is vegan. You can adjust, right? No greeting, no please, no recognition that he was adding complexity to something he wasn't participating in." I stared at the message for a few seconds, then typed back, "Of course." Because, again, that was the role. The one I had played so well that no one ever questioned whether I wanted to keep playing it. I didn't go grocery shopping that day. Instead, I went to my office. Not because I had to, but because it was quiet. Controlled. Mine. The building was nearly empty, most people already out for the holidays, and I sat at my desk overlooking the city, watching traffic move in slow, steady patterns below, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to think past the immediate obligation in front of me. Not just Christmas, not just dinner, but everything. The money, the time, the quiet, consistent support I had given without ever documenting it, without ever attaching conditions, without ever making it visible enough to be acknowledged properly. I opened my laptop, logged into my accounts, and started listing it out. Property taxes, $17,842. Furnace replacement, $6,300. Roof repairs, $11,600. Miscellaneous expenses, smaller things, recurring things, things that added up faster than anyone ever realized. By the time I was done, the total sat just over $52,000. I stared at the number, not shocked, not even angry. Just aware, because seeing it all in one place removed any illusion that this had been occasional help. It was a system, and I was the one sustaining it. At 2:15 p.m., I made a call. Not to my parents, not to my brother, to my assistant. "Hey," I said when she answered, her voice already halfway into holiday mode. "I need you to move something for me." "Of course," she said. "What do you need?" "I have a flight tomorrow night. International." A pause. "Okay, that's short notice." "I know. Where to?" I looked out the window again, at the city I had built my life in without ever fully separating from the one I came from. "Lisbon," I said. Another pause. Then a small, surprised laugh. "Okay. That's specific. I'll send you my passport details. Just book it. First available." "Done," she said, without asking why, because unlike my family, she understood something important. If I said I needed something, there was a reason. Even if she didn't know it yet. By the evening of December 23rd, everything was in place. The plan they thought existed, and the one that actually did. At 6:48 p.m., my mother called. Her voice softer than my father's, but carrying the same underlying assumption that I was already in motion, already preparing, already aligning my time with their expectations. "Did you get everything?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Not a lie. Just not the truth she thought it was. "And you'll come early tomorrow?" "I will." That one wasn't even technically false. I would go. Just not in the way she imagined. She hesitated for a moment, then added, quieter, "It's a lot this year." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the closest anyone had come to acknowledging it. "Yes," I said. "It is." Another pause. Then, "We appreciate it." I closed my eyes for a second. Because those words, they should have meant something. They should have softened the edges of everything else. But they didn't. Because appreciation without change is just a way to keep something going. And I was done keeping it going. December 24th. Christmas Eve. I woke up before my alarm. Again, not out of stress, not out of obligation, but because my body didn't know yet that this was different. That this day was no longer structured around meeting expectations that had never been negotiated. I moved slowly that morning. Deliberately. Showered. Dressed. Packed a small suitcase. Nothing excessive. Nothing dramatic. Just enough for a trip that had no defined return date. At 3:10 p.m., I got into my car, At 3:52, I pulled up in front of my parents' house. The same house. The same door. The same expectations waiting behind it. Only this time, I wasn't there to fulfill them. I was there to end them. The house was already alive when I stepped inside. Voices overlapped from every direction, laughter from the living room, music playing just loud enough to blur conversations together, footsteps moving across the floor in a rhythm that felt chaotic and careless, like no one inside had ever once thought about what it took to create all of this. It smelled like nothing. No food, no preparation, no effort. Just perfume, alcohol, and expectation. Exactly as I knew it would. My father noticed me first. He walked in from the hallway with the same controlled confidence he carried everywhere, glanced toward the kitchen, and then back at me. "You're later than usual," he said. No greeting. No Merry Christmas. Just timing, measurement, evaluation. I set my bag down slowly. "I won't be long," I replied. That was enough for him. Because in his mind, there was only one thing I could possibly mean. That I was about to start. Caleb appeared a few seconds later, already holding a drink, already relaxed in a way that only comes from knowing someone else is responsible for everything. "Hey," he said casually, "people are starting to get hungry." Of course they were. They had arrived expecting to be fed, not by him, not by my parents. By me. I nodded once. "Good," I said. He didn't even register the tone. Didn't notice the difference. Didn't see anything beyond the assumption he had always lived inside. I walked into the kitchen. Empty counters. Cold oven. Nothing prepared. Nothing started. Exactly as planned. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at the space where, every other year, I would have already spent hours working, cutting, seasoning, organizing, timing everything down to the minute so that no one ever had to wait, no one ever had to think, no one ever had to feel the weight of what it took to make it all happen. And for the first time, I did nothing. At 7:03 p.m., the first question came. Is dinner almost ready? Not directed at anyone specific. Just thrown into the air like it always was. Because the answer had always been predictable. Always yes. Always handled. Always under control. Silence followed. Then another voice. I thought food was at 8? It is 8. Laughter. Confusion. A shift. Subtle at first. Then growing. Because something wasn't aligning with expectation. And expectation was the only thing holding all of this together. At 7:08, my father walked into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw it. Or rather, when he saw nothing, his eyes moved across the counters. The stove, the oven. Then to me, standing there, still. Calm, not working, not moving, not fixing it. What is this? He asked. I met his gaze. This, I said evenly, is what it looks like when I don't do it. For a second, he didn't understand. Not fully, because the idea itself didn't fit inside the structure he had built in his mind. You're behind, he said, as if correcting a minor delay. Start now. We can still manage. We. I almost smiled. No, I said. And that was the first time in my life I had ever said that to him, without softening it. Without explaining it. Without apologizing for it. Just, no. The room shifted again. Not physically, but emotionally. You could feel it, like something invisible had cracked. What do you mean no? Caleb asked, stepping closer now, his tone sharper, confusion turning into irritation. People are here. I know, I said. They're expecting dinner. I know. Then what are you doing? I held his gaze. Leaving. That word landed harder than anything else. Because it didn't just disrupt the evening. It threatened the entire system. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face already tense, already trying to hold everything together before it could fall apart. Arya, she said quietly, this isn't the time for this. I looked at her, and for a moment, I almost stepped back into it. Almost returned to the role. Almost fixed it like I always had. But then I remembered the list. The numbers. The years. And the fact that if I didn't end it now, I never would. There is no good time for this, I said. Voices from the other room started getting louder now. People asking questions. Someone laughing awkwardly. Someone else suggesting ordering food. The illusion was breaking. And everyone could feel it. My father took a step closer, lowered his voice. You don't embarrass this family, he said. I let out a small breath, not anger, not fear. Just clarity. I'm not the one doing that, I replied. Silence. Real silence this time. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because deep down, he knew. I have spent years doing this, I continued, my voice steady, controlled, carrying just enough to reach the doorway, just enough for others to hear pieces of it without fully understanding. Not once, not occasionally. Every time. Every holiday, every situation where something needed to be handled, no one interrupted. Because they couldn't. I paid your debts, I said, looking directly at him now. Fixed your house. Covered your emergencies. And not one of you, not once, asked whether I wanted to keep doing it. My mother's expression shifted. Caleb looked away. My father stayed still, rigid. Controlled. But quieter now. Your family, he said. And there it was. The justification. The expectation disguised as loyalty. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. I am. Then I picked up my bag. And that's exactly why I should have been treated like one. No one stopped me when I walked past them, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know how. Because this version of me, the one who didn't bend, didn't fix, didn't stay, didn't exist in their understanding of the world. At the front door I paused for just a second, not to reconsider, not to hesitate, but to feel it, the end of something that had defined me for far too long. Behind me, voices had already shifted into damage control. Phones coming out, plans being made. Someone saying they'd order food, someone else blaming miscommunication, anything but the truth. At 7:14 p.m., I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. By the time the plane took off, I turned my phone back on. Messages flooded in. Calls, texts, voicemails, anger, confusion, guilt, demands. And then, hours later, apologies, not for what had been done, but for how it had ended, because that was the only part they couldn't ignore. I didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not the day after that, because for the first time in my life, silence wasn't something being used against me. It was something I chose. A week later, I received a single message from my father. Short, direct, carefully worded. We need to discuss how to move forward. I read it once, then locked my phone, because for the first time, moving forward didn't mean returning. Lisbon was quiet that morning. Sunlight moved slowly across the water, people walked without urgency, conversations happened without expectation, and I sat at a small outdoor table with a cup of coffee I didn't have to rush through, in a place where no one knew me as the person who handled everything, just someone who had finally stopped. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that people don't notice the weight you carry for them until you put it down. The question is never whether they'll feel it. They will. The real question is, will you ever pick it up again?